I believe I was 5 years old when I experienced one of my most intense brushes with injustice. There's nothing like 5 years old to feel indignation. I had taken a small toy, probably a stuffed animal, from a friend's house where we spent the night when we were driving across the country. And my recollection is that I was told by the owners of that home that I could have it because I fell in love with it, whatever that little thing was. Then I got in trouble when my parents saw me with it hours later on the drive. Now, the details are blurry, and I believe my mother has a different version than I do, but because of the intensity of my emotional reaction at that time, the story has a legendary quality for me. I'm not someone who typically steals things. However, I resonate with the writer Annie Dillard, who wrote beautifully in one of her memoirs about leaving little pennies on the ground intentionally to see who would have the pleasure of finding them. And I believe the universe, spirit, God, whatever force you want to name, the earth, if you will, is continuously offering us little surprises, little gifts. And sometimes we are gifted with things that do not feel pleasant at all. Now, this morning, I pulled a soul collage card from my collection of soul collage cards that I've created. And the one that I pulled, I named Spacious Child. The images are of little girls lingering over beautiful objects in nature. One is a picture of two little girls with their toes soaking in little mini baths. And it was delightful to pull that card and briefly journal on it because I had already planned to soak my feet. So I had a little tub of hot water with Epsom salt in it already prepared. And I painted my toenails purple. I look forward to getting a pedicure, hopefully at some point before summer's end, but adding that little purple myself and having my feet soak as I journaled about what it feels like to be a spacious child. That was a perfect way to start a warm day in Massachusetts. The past week, the past lifetime have been full of adventures, warm days and cold ones. And I am someone who has a tendency to find delight in the smallest of surprises, like Annie Dillard. And she brought that out in me, that incredible writer, when I started reading her books ages ago. Accidentally, I stole this roll of blue painter's tape from Lisa Hahn and Betsy, my new, hopefully friend, Betsy. She's not sitting over there, but Betsy's a dance instructor at Salem State. I met one of her students, Isabel, and Isabel's father. And Lisa Hahn is the owner, manager of Windhover Performing Arts Center up in Rockport, Massachusetts. This is one of my favorite places. I've spoken about it on Monday Morning Muse before. It's a place where you can walk through the grass barefoot if you're careful. not necessarily recommended. But there's granite rocks and formations, trees that are old, people who have been coming there for years. It's a dance camp, and Einahan co-created it many, many years ago. The feeling of it is sacred ground. And even though I don't live particularly close to Rockport at this point, when I saw the spring workday coming up, there was nothing I wanted more than to be with other people, see Lisa for the first time in a while. I met Betsy and Isabel and others for the first time, and it felt like a homecoming. Ever since I put my feet on the ground at Windhover for the first time and felt the breeze blow, I felt a soul connection to the place. Maybe because I'm a performer, a dancer, maybe because it felt like a place where people can run around and scamper through possibility. I used this Blue Painters tape to label and reorganize some of the kitchen cabinets, and that brought me so much pleasure. There's nothing that pleases me more than clarifying the organization of something. And that comes from mostly my father, I think, loving to organize things, but also the way it brought my mother relief and pleasure, and the way it's always made the lives around me a little simpler. Yesterday at a lovely coffee shop within a brewery, I wrote in the corner of my journal page the title of today's musing. Because when I think about being 5 and taking something that was gifted to me, at least in my 5-year-old understanding, then getting in trouble for it later, it became one of my first stories that was my story, different version than my parents'. And that's both typical for a 5-year-old and maybe a little extra, because I was the kind of 5-year-old who was already writing little stories phonetically. I don't think I wrote that one down, but I guess I didn't have anything to write with at the time, being on a road trip and everything. Lisa and Betsy thought it was funny that I emailed them about my absconding with tape. And I sent them a silly picture of myself holding the tape yesterday, looking perplexed. I think it's important to get silly sometimes, and when you have accidentally stolen something, that's a good moment to be silly, especially since painter's tape is not incredibly expensive, and I will bring back the rest of this roll when I'm up there next, which will be pretty soon, I think. The other part of the title of this particular entry, Advice I've Ignored, that felt just as important as getting confessional about the ways in which accidentally stealing things has created some of my stories. Advice I've ignored. I think in general in this lifetime, I have ignored the times when people have told me what to do next. In the literature of ADHD and psychology, sometimes people talk about the counter will. It's something that gets activated when a person feels their power is being usurped. We all have a will. The phrase, where there's a will, there's a way, is true and also sometimes not entirely true. You might have a desire or a will or an intention of accomplishing something, and forces outside your control get in the way repeatedly. When I have a storyline that feels not fully realized in the way that I want it to be realized, I have a tendency to hold on to some thread of the narrative arc such that I don't entirely let it go, but I let it be for a while. Maybe that's because, like so many people, I grew up listening to the Beatles. There is a wisdom that comes with letting something be, letting something lie. And there is the fire within each of us that circles back to the threads from our past and desires or even requires some kind of completion. I have often been told by others what would be wise from their perspective, and I have listened. But also, as a teacher, as a human who has been spending lots of time throughout my life talking to older people, younger people, paying attention to a lot of details, one of my favorite lines, I'm going to forget who it comes from, comes in the advice to not be satisfied with stories, how it has gone for others, but unfold your own myth. I'm going to have to look up who that comes from. I believe it comes from a poem called Letter to My Daughter. And while the name of the writer eludes me, I put it on a bulletin board for months at a time. Is it Langston Hughes? I don't know. I'll look it up. When I think about unfolding my own myth, I think about the ways in which each of us is here to tell a story unique to us. And even if we're trying for something that resembles normalcy or success, we'll do it in a way that is our own. That's what it is to be born into a human life. How amazing it is to be born into a human life. When I have ignored the advice of others, I've done so sometimes petulantly, like a young person who is just annoyed. But more often I've done so from a place of knowing, a deep inner knowing. Intuition, Holy Spirit guidance, some deep intuition that I know what is best for me, and I am listening for the voices from beyond, ancestors, angels, prophets, priests, beings that have wisdom beyond what I can intuit right now. When I remember the 5-year-old who took a toy, I cherish that 5-year-old from the age of 45. And I breathe into the possibility that each of us not only intuits what is ours to do in a lifetime, but encounters others who will not only give us their best wisdom, but will live adjacent to us in communities that allow us to become our whole selves. I'm so grateful that I grew up in families and communities where my gifting was seen and where I was both empowered and at times pricked. The fire in me was stoked from the time I was a child. And it has not died, and it will not die. And that is the gift of partly who I am, but partly how I've been taught and nurtured. On Saturday, after helping out at Windhover, I got to see my friend, my colleague, fellow music educator, John Hicks, at a brew pub in Ipswich. And I'll put a picture of John and I in this post. John and I both have gotten to work with many different ages, many different people, and I'm determined to start teaching again. Yoga, dance, Zumba, voice, and some art, soul collage. I'm determined to find routines around these teaching practices. It's partly because John understands me on a deep soul level as a music educator, as a human, as someone who's also worked in psychological spaces. Both of us know that our presence and our offerings are therapeutic without needing to be officially therapy. And being in his presence was a reminder of so much that I already know. So when I had him sign my old Toy Story lunchbox, and we both chatted with the little children who were unsupervised at the time, we knew that our grounded adult presence was part of what gave those little children a sense of possibility and joy, scampering around the side room at that brewery. And when a weary-looking mother came in to talk with one of the children, I remembered that being a teacher is something I've done since I was very, very young. Being a storyteller is part of me too. And no matter how the next days and months of my life unfold, there is always work available for those of us who are willing to teach. And those of us who are willing to ignore some advice for the sake of the truth that wants to unfold through us. So I've already set a date to do a Substack Live on, I believe it's the first Monday in June. I'll do that about once a month, but whether or not you join me on Substack, or I think this Wednesday I'm going to try to do a midday YouTube Live, whatever it looks like to be human for you today, breathe. Look for the little miracles, the objects that are being gifted to you. And feel free to ignore the advice of anyone who speaks out a truth that is not for you to live. Cheers.